She texted you 3 times. You saw it. You didn't respond. Maybe you were busy. Maybe you were testing something. Maybe you just didn't feel like it. And then something strange happened. She went quiet. Not the angry kind of quiet, the dangerous kind. The kind where you check her profile, and she's still active, still posting, still laughing with other people, just not with you. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a little alarm goes off. Wait, did I just mess something up? Yeah, you did. And what's about to unfold is a psychological chain reaction most people never see coming until it's already too late. Welcome to PsyCraft Daily, where we break down the hidden psychology behind everyday human behavior. If this is your first time here, stick around. This channel is going to change how you see people. Now let's get into it. Because what happens when you ignore a woman isn't just about hurt feelings or someone getting upset. There's a sequence of psychological events that plays out almost every single time. And understanding that sequence changes everything about how you navigate relationships, communication, and attraction. Here's something most people completely miss. The moment she realizes she's being ignored, whether it's a text left on read, a conversation that just dies, or a plan that never gets followed up on, her brain doesn't just feel rejected, it activates. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for making sense of the world, immediately starts looking for an explanation. Why isn't he responding? Is he busy? Did I say something wrong? Is he talking to someone else? Is this intentional? And this matters because humans, by evolutionary design, are wired to resolve ambiguity. Uncertainty feels like a threat, and when the brain perceives a threat, it allocates resources to figure it out. So, what does she do in those first few hours? She replays the last conversation. She checks timestamps. She looks for clues. She might even scroll back through old messages trying to find a pattern, not because she's obsessed, but because her brain is genuinely trying to solve a problem. Think about this. If someone told you point blank, "I don't like you," that would hurt. But your brain would also move on relatively quickly. It has a clear answer. But being ignored, that's an open loop. And open loops are psychologically exhausting. They demand closure. This is actually documented in psychology. Researchers call it the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency for the brain to obsess over incomplete tasks far more than completed ones. Being ignored creates an incomplete emotional task, and the brain keeps coming back to it. So, in those first 24 hours, while you're sitting there thinking, "I'm giving her space," or "she'll reach out if she wants to talk," her mind is running a full investigation. You just don't know it yet. So, what do? If you've ignored someone accidentally, caught up in life, genuinely distracted, the worst thing you can do is come back with, "Sorry, been busy." That doesn't close the loop. It just confirms you weren't prioritizing. Instead, acknowledge the gap specifically. "Hey, I know I dropped the ball on responding to that. What you said deserved more than a one-word answer." That shows awareness. That shows you actually heard her, even late. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because at the 24-hour mark, something shifts. There's a pivot point. And most guys never realize it exists. When the first wave of confusion doesn't get resolved, her emotional state quietly shifts. She stops wondering if you're okay. She starts wondering something much more important to her sense of self. Do I even want to keep trying? This is the moment where the power dynamic of the entire connection quietly begins to reorganize. And it happens internally. You won't see it on the outside. She might still be posting her usual content. She might even send you a casual message like nothing happened. But inside, she's running a different calculation now. Let me show you how this actually works. Psychologically speaking, there's a concept called the investment model, developed by researcher Carol Rusbolt. And it basically says that how committed someone stays in any relationship depends on 3 things: how satisfied they feel, what they'd lose if they left, and whether they see better alternatives. When you ignore someone, you chip away at the satisfaction variable, and when satisfaction drops, the other two variables start to shift with it. She starts noticing the guy who does respond immediately. She starts remembering that she had a full, interesting life before this connection became a thing she had to chase. She starts feeling something that actually feels kinda good, relief maybe, or the early stages of emotional detachment. This is the part that catches men off guard every single time. They assume that silence creates mystery and pulls someone closer. Sometimes it does, for a short window. But the science suggests that prolonged, unexplained silence doesn't create desire. It creates distance, real, measurable emotional distance. There's a difference between healthy space, where both people feel secure, and the kind of cold silence that leaves someone feeling invisible. One builds tension, the other builds walls. So, what do? If you notice that a woman has started going cold after a period of you being distant, don't double down on the silence. That's a losing game. But also, don't flood her with attention suddenly. That signals panic, not confidence. The move is calm, genuine re-engagement. No big apology speech. No dramatic explanation. Just show up like a secure person who values the connection and wants to actually invest in it. Now, I want to address the elephant in the room, because some of you watching this are ignoring someone on purpose, and you think you know what you're doing. Let me show you why it almost always backfires. There's a whole school of thought, and honestly, a whole corner of the internet, dedicated to the idea that ignoring a woman is a power move, that it creates attraction, that pulling back makes her chase harder. And look, there's a sliver of truth buried in there. Psychological reactance is real. When people feel like they're losing access to something, they often want it more. It's why limited time offers work. It's why someone who's slightly unavailable can feel more interesting than someone who's constantly available. But here's the thing nobody tells you. That principle only functions within a context of established genuine connection and mutual respect. Outside that context, manufactured ignorance isn't a power move. It's just confusion wrapped in ego. Think about someone like Marcus, confident guy, thought he had the formula figured out. Met a woman, things were going well, and then he decided to pull back intentionally. Ignore her for a few days. Let her wonder. What actually happened is she made plans for the weekend, stopped thinking about him by Tuesday, and went on a date with someone else by Thursday. Not out of spite, just because her life kept moving. When Marcus came back acting casual like nothing happened, he was genuinely blindsided that she'd already moved on emotionally. He thought he was playing chess. He was actually just absent. Here's what that strategy misses entirely. Women, especially emotionally secure, high-value women, do not interpret unexplained silence as confidence. They interpret it as inconsistency. And inconsistency reads as a red flag, not an attractive quality. The psychological research on attachment styles backs this up hard. Inconsistent behavior, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, no clear reason why, is actually one of the primary triggers for anxious attachment patterns. You're not creating attraction, you're creating anxiety. And anxiety-based attachment is unstable, exhausting, and ultimately toxic for both people involved. So, what do? Real confidence doesn't require manufactured scarcity. You don't have to pretend to be unavailable. You just have to actually have a life worth being present in. When you're genuinely busy, invested in your own growth, and not sitting around waiting for validation from any one person, your natural availability and energy shifts in a way that's actually attractive. You don't have to play a game. You just have to be real. Let that sink in for a second. Because the next part is where we get into something most relationship content never touches. Let's say this isn't a one-time thing. Let's say there's a pattern. She reaches out, you're inconsistent. She wants to connect, you're half present. She brings something up emotionally, you go quiet. What builds over time isn't just frustration, it's something quieter and much more permanent. There's a process in psychology called emotional numbing, and it's essentially the brain's protective response to repeated disappointment. When someone expects a warm response and gets coldness instead, again and again, the brain starts to update its expectations. It literally rewires around the new pattern. She stops hoping for warmth, not because she's bitter, but because her nervous system has learned that warmth isn't coming. Think about Priya. She'd been in a relationship for about 8 months with someone who was wildly inconsistent, hot and cold, present and then vanished. Over time, not dramatically, not with any big breakup speech, she just stopped feeling things as strongly. She stopped bringing up things that mattered to her. She stopped initiating real conversations. Her friends actually thought she was fine because she seemed so calm. She was calm. She just emotionally checked out. She didn't even realize it was happening until she was on the other side of this relationship, wondering why she felt nothing when it finally ended. That's what sustained emotional neglect does. It doesn't make someone explode. It makes them go quiet in a way that's almost impossible to reverse. And here's the painful truth that comes with that. By the time she's at that stage, by the time she stopped reaching out, stopped showing up emotionally, stopped caring if you respond, most men mistake that for her being unbothered or low maintenance. They think things are actually going smoothly. They have no idea the connection is already gone. So, what do? Pay attention to the change in her behavior, not just the behavior itself. If someone who used to reach out often suddenly stops, that's data. If someone who used to share things with you starts keeping everything surface level, that's a signal. The absence of conflict is not always peace. Sometimes it's withdrawal, and withdrawal left unaddressed becomes departure. Now, I want to pivot to something that reframes this entire conversation. Because we've been talking about what happens to her. Let's talk about what it reveals about you. Here's something nobody wants to hear, but I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't say it. When someone consistently ignores, withdraws from, or stays emotionally unavailable in connection with another person, it rarely has much to do with the other person at all. It has everything to do with what's going on internally. Fear of intimacy is far more common than most men will admit out loud, and it doesn't always look like shyness or social anxiety. Sometimes it looks like control, sometimes it looks like strategy, sometimes it looks like, I'm just not a texter, or I don't like being too available. Those can be true on the surface while masking something much deeper, a fear that if someone gets too close, too consistently, they'll find something worth leaving. Psychologist John Bowlby's work on attachment theory is really the foundation here. Our earliest experiences with caregivers create templates, internal working models, for how we expect relationships to function. Someone who grew up in an emotionally unpredictable environment might unconsciously recreate that unpredictability in their own adult relationships. Not maliciously, not even consciously. But the pattern runs anyway. And this matters because the solution isn't just communicate better or respond faster. The solution is actually understanding what you're protecting yourself from, and whether that protection is still serving you or quietly costing you every meaningful connection you try to build. Think about a guy like Jordan, great at first impressions, genuinely funny and warm when he's present, but the moment a connection starts to feel real, he pulls back. He tells himself he's just not the clingy type. But what's actually happening is that closeness triggers something uncomfortable, so he creates distance instinctively. And then he's genuinely confused when women lose interest, not realizing he's been the one setting fire to the bridge every time. So, what do? Honest self-inventory. Ask yourself, when I go silent, when I don't respond, when I create distance, what am I actually feeling right before I do it? Is it really indifference, or is it something that looks like indifference but feels more like self-protection? That question alone, if you sit with it seriously, can unlock more self-awareness than years of surface-level dating advice. Let's bring this all together, because here's the thing about everything we've covered: the psychology, the patterns, the ripple effects. None of it is meant to make you feel like you have to be perfect, or that one misstep ruins everything. Real connection, the kind that's stable, that grows, that doesn't require games or calculated silence or emotional strategy, is built on something deceptively simple: consistency, emotional presence, and the willingness to show up, even when it's slightly uncomfortable. Not grand gestures, not perfectly timed responses, not mysterious disappearing acts that leave someone wanting more. Just the boring, underrated, massively powerful act of being reliably present. There's a concept in developmental psychology called secure attachment. And the interesting thing is that it's not built on excitement or intensity. It's built on predictability. When a child knows that their caregiver will consistently respond to their needs, they develop confidence. They feel safe enough to explore. They don't cling or shut down. They thrive. The same dynamic plays out in adult relationships. When someone feels like you're reliably there, not perfect, not always available every second, but genuinely consistent in your attention and care, they feel secure. And from security, something remarkable happens. Attraction deepens, trust forms. The relationship actually has room to become something real. Here's the practical version of that. You don't have to respond within 3 minutes. You don't have to be endlessly enthusiastic or available 24/7. But when you say you'll follow up, follow up. When she shares something meaningful, engage with it genuinely. When life pulls you away for a moment, acknowledge it rather than vanishing into silence like you were never there. These aren't grand romantic moves, they're signals. And those signals tell someone's nervous system, you are safe with me. That's the foundation. Everything else, chemistry, humor, physical attraction, those are sparks. But safety and consistency, that's the fireplace those sparks actually need to become a real flame. So, what do? Stop optimizing for mystery and start optimizing for meaning. Mystery fades, meaning compounds. The most attractive version of you isn't the version that keeps people guessing. It's the version that makes people feel genuinely seen, heard, and worth your actual attention. Here's your takeaway from everything we went through today. Ignoring someone doesn't just create a moment of tension. It creates a sequence. First comes confusion, then self-protection, then emotional detachment. And if it goes on long enough, a version of disconnection that can't be undone just by showing back up and acting like nothing happened. The psychology is clear on this. Ambiguity doesn't build connection. It erodes it. Manufactured unavailability doesn't create attraction in emotionally healthy people. It creates doubt. And patterns of hot and cold behavior don't keep someone interested. They keep someone anxious. And eventually, they keep someone gone. The real power move, and I mean this genuinely, is having the self-awareness to show up with intention, to understand what your silence communicates even when you're not saying a word, to recognize that how you make someone feel in your absence tells them everything about what it would feel like to fully let you in. That's the thing nobody's talking about. It's not about who texts first or who cares more or who has more leverage. It's about whether you're the kind of person someone feels better knowing, whether your presence, and yes, your absence, builds or quietly dismantles the connection you claim you want. That question is worth sitting with, seriously, because the answer shapes everything. If something in this hit differently for you, drop it in the comments. I read them, and the conversations you start down there actually shape where this channel goes next. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share it. Not to call anyone out, but because sometimes the right perspective at the right time genuinely changes things. See you in the next one.